We have Rachel Maddow in the international zone in Baghdad, and she's been there for several days with the troops and with many of the great thinkers involved in this process. What do you know about the logistics that Jack just mentioned, Rachel? Anything?
Well, we are hearing frequently that, as Jack said, that the military is leaving now because the military can leave now. Obviously, it's an operational security consideration in terms of getting out when people don't expect you to be getting out. When NBC News learned that this convoy was going to be going out, likely at this time, likely on this date, and that we would be the only people who would be able to broadcast from this, I was brought into a very, very close circle of people who knew that that was going to happen in order to get me here in time so that I could report here on what it's going to be like. But I think it's also important to reiterate what Richard said earlier about the fact that the military very well may have slowed this down almost as much as they can. They have been moving out for a very long time. The numbers in Iraq have been declining quietly while U.S. coverage has been sotto voce for essentially at least a year at this point. And while there may be some consideration as to whether or not the presence of U.S. forces, presence of U.S. combat troops here makes it more likely that an Iraqi government could be formed, that the time of leaving may have been delayed in order to try to stretch it out, in order to try to hope that the Iraqis would form a government by the time that we left. I tend, from what I've seen here, to side with Richard to believe that the Iraqis aren't watching the U.S. so closely to decide what they're going to do. They're caught up in their own arguments about what they're going to do about their own country. The symbolism of us leaving without an Iraqi government formed here is much more American symbolism than it is Iraqi symbolism.
Yeah, that does raise that question again. What is the American departure from Iraq seemed to have been, and we're just watching the end of it here, seems to have been largely devoid of any connection to the Iraqis. The other symbolism, we're talking about the wonderful symbolism of the departure and of these last 440 troops representing all those who got out safely and the conclusion of the combat operations with these combat troops. But the other symbolism is we're sort of leaving on our own, are we not? There's no formal connection to the Iraqi government in this symbolic process.
That's exactly right. The terms on which we are leaving are politically negotiated terms. The Status of Forces Agreement was signed by George W. Bush and by the Maliki government. That was about when all U.S. troops leave next year and when U.S. forces pulled out of the cities, an incredibly important deadline that happened last summer. This date, this month, this was picked by Barack Obama. It is political. All of the lip service that's paid by American politicians pounding their chest and talking about conditions on the ground being dictatorial, it's chest pounding. It's political rhetoric. The U.S. troops leave on a U.S. political timeline, and that's negotiated because we have civilian control of our military in this country, and it's one of the things that makes America America. I'll tell you, Keith, there has been an uptick in violence here recently. Yesterday, before Richard embedded with these combat troops leaving, he and I had planned to go sightsee and shoot some footage around central Baghdad together. A few hours before we went, that suicide bomber killed 41 police recruits not far from central Baghdad in the northeastern part of the city. Today, here in the Green Zone, or the IZ, the International Zone, one of the options we asked permission to use as a live set for this broadcast tonight, the famous Crossed Swords parade grounds here, just here, was hit with 2 rockets just a few hours ago when our crew would have been setting up for the shot had we elected to be there. No one was hurt, thankfully, and we're not broadcasting from that spot right now. We were given a stern talking to by the colonel who functions as the mayor of this base that if an alarm sounds during this broadcast tonight, no excuses, no explaining to you at home what's going on. We have to hit the deck or get into a nearby blast shelter. And so if that happens, that's what's going on. I mean, both Ramadan itself and the departure of U.S. combat troops are a hook, an excuse for the insurgency to spike its attacks. Here with the U.S. military and all the force protection measures, we're inside. I feel safe. That said, I would not want to be an Iraqi police officer in Baghdad. I would not want to be a Shiite making a religious pilgrimage to one of my religion's holy sites here in Iraq. If I were an Iraqi mom, I would be keeping my kids very close in this environment right now. U.S. troops I've spoken with who've worked with Iraqi security forces here recently express confidence both in their capability and in how far the Iraqis have come. But this is a dangerous place right now, inarguably. And regardless of whether or not U.S. troops are here in great numbers or not, it does not feel like that's getting less dangerous here. It feels like it's getting worse. Now, we're not leaving because of conditions on the ground. We're leaving because we negotiated with the government of Iraq to leave.